just get started. I think you can sometimes think a lot and almost kind of hinder yourself about like what you want to talk about. I think a lot of the times the things I want to talk about just kind of come that spur of the moment, like an idea, jot that down, start a note list and just start filming. Don't think too much, just start posting. And then I would say find an area that interests you, that you're passionate about.
Welcome back to another episode of the Med Creator 101 podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Dustin Portella. I'm a board-certified dermatologist and physician content creator. And I am joined, as always, by my co-host, Mimi Banks, the founder of MB Social. We're excited to welcome onto the podcast today a very special guest, Dr. Jenny Liu, a board-certified dermatologist and content creator in the dermatology and skincare space under the name of @DermTalk on social media. She has more than 800,000 followers, and she is an assistant professor in dermatology at the University of Minnesota and a former chair of her department. She's passionate about medical education, specializing in SOC, complex medical dermatology, and cosmetic dermatology. She's also a mom of two, married to an ENT, and active on RedNote, a platform that we have not yet talked about on our podcast. She loves watching Asian dramas, and she's into her coffee. Welcome to the podcast, Jenny Liu.
Thank you so much for having me. Such an honor to be here and chat about my journey on social media and beyond.
Before we actually go into your exciting career in social media, we like to get to know you beyond your bio, as we like to say, with a few personal questions. Are you open for it?
Yeah.
So this is maybe a little bit easy to start, but what's your favorite day of the week?
Wednesday.
Interesting. Why?
Because there's a lot of diversity in the sense I staff resident clinic. We do some procedures. I have a few cosmetic patients at the end of the day. And then I'm pretty much done mid-morning. And then I have the afternoon to myself. Usually I do some errands, maybe work out, get a massage, create content. It's mid of the week. Have the weekends to look forward to.
Sounds like a great Wednesday. I wish my Wednesday looked like that. What about a place you've most wanted to travel?
Oh, I would say now, probably Japan. Wanted to go there. Have always wanted to go there and so look forward to going there someday.
Favorite childhood TV show?
I had to think back, like, I don't actually watch a lot of TV. So aside from like Asian dramas, I started binging like college, but childhood, Sailor Moon cartoon show, does that count?
Sure, of course it counts.
Manga. Yeah, I just remember when I was like maybe in like middle school. I don't even know how old I was, but I would like set my alarm to wake up at like 5:50 because it aired every day at 6 a.m. I would like tiptoe downstairs because my parents were still sleeping and like turn on the TV and watch Sailor Moon. Like I was obsessed with that cartoon.
Wait, that's amazing. I've never heard of it. Dustin, do you know it?
Yeah, I've heard of it.
It's a Japanese manga series and it's like superheroes. They turn into like warriors and they fight and they come from like different planets like the moon. There's Sailor Mars, Sailor Jupiter. I was like obsessed with it.
That's amazing. Setting a rigid schedule, being determined from day one.
Yeah, right? I was determined, very determined.
This one's a little bit easier. If you're an ice cream person, what's your favorite flavor?
I would say probably strawberry. I could always go back to strawberry. I love trying different flavors, but strawberries, hands down, always good.
I think I'm boring. I like a vanilla soft serve. That would be my go-to all day, every day.
Yeah, I mean, that I think you can do a lot of variety of like toppings.
That's true.
That would be like my next choice. I like strawberries with, if they have like a little bit of chunks of strawberries, oh, those are good. Yeah.
But you have to get it when it's fresh strawberries because a lot of time they use the ones that have like a lot of syrup sometimes.
Yeah, we try not to eat as much ice cream. My kids love sweets, and that's why it's like I gotta hold back. Before, when they were little, I could hide them, but now we have locks on our freezer. And my son, because our fridge is like the freezer's on the bottom, he knows now at like 2.5 how to open the locks. So I can't hide desserts anymore. Like used to be able to hide them. Now, like they know where they are. They'll find it.
They can do that. I'm sure. Does he turn on and off the TV or turn on to your phone?
Oh, yeah. I mean, this kid knows how to find YouTube on the iPad.
I know. My daughter does too. It's crazy.
Oh, I know.
Let's talk about social media. Let's talk about how you've built this incredible community platform while being an HCP, juggling your career, the demands of being a mom. And also now you have an incredible podcast that we should talk about too and plug that. How do you do it all?
Well, I don't. I think this is where probably like Lindsay and Mamina have all said, and we acknowledge, well, first of all, it's been such an incredible journey. And like, I think maybe Dustin has shared his story at one point in time, but mine started way back, like I was looking through my post on Instagram. My very first post was in 2016. So I think I was one of the first few, aside from like Joyce Park and Laura Scott, one of the first few derms that started on Instagram. But even before Instagram was a thing, my journey was I was just looking for a creative outlet. So I just finished residency. I signed on with a practice that literally put me as the medical director. And then a few years later became chair, but it was more out of a necessity. Like I never had an interest in business aspect of medicine. It was more just, I was joining an older practice. The guy was looking to retire. I joined with two other girls from residency. One was already heading a fellowship. The other one was expecting. So I just kind of became the medical director. And at that time, I didn't have kids. My husband was actually finishing his residency. So I basically was like, sure, I'll do it. And I wanted something that was just kind of helping me diverse the attention, the frustration of administration with, medicine. And so I looked into social media because at that time I scrolled a lot on Instagram for like fashion and cooking. And so I started that. It was more just as a hobby, like, oh, I could see myself creating some content on skincare, maybe fashion. I'm petite. So talk about petite fashion in the workplace, women medicine. So that's how I started. And my first post was like, November is healthy skin, month. Did you change up your routine? I remember that photo. It took me like 30 minutes to stage and photograph. So that's how I started. And then it was like a little bit of everything. I talked about fashion, talked about skincare, talked about like being married to a resident at that time. And I grew quite a bit of following, maybe 30, 50,000. And then COVID hit. That is when like things really took off. People that had a pre-existing Instagram really took off. And then that was also the opportunity where a lot of people saw that opportunity, a lot of dermatologists, content creators, doctors, physicians, medicine, and used that to kind of launch their brand and their platform. And that's kind of how it started for me. So it was never like, oh, I wanted to leverage Instagram to grow my practice or to grow a brand or to start skincare. It just kind of been like happenstance. And I've been so grateful for all the opportunities that's come my way, including this podcast and also meeting people like Dustin, like yourself, like Lindsay, Mamina, friends, lifelong friends, and colleagues. That was my journey. And so how I do it now, going back to your question, is my husband is very supportive. I can't do this without him. So are my parents, my father-in-law. He stays over often when I'm traveling. I've kind of had to cut back a little bit on work and then kind of stepping back as the chair from my department, mostly because of internal changes. But also, actually, we're planning to move to Seattle this summer. And so took a step down a few years back to prepare for that. And then basically now half of my time is spent working, teaching. I still love teaching with residents and teaching medical students and non-derm residents, and then creating content. And then when I do have time, I try to definitely set aside time when I'm not creating content with my kids. Because I think that's the thing is like, people are asking like, how do you do it all? Well, you're not, because when you are creating content, you're missing out on time with kids. Or if you're traveling, you're missing out on time with your kids and your husband. And then when you are with your kids and husband, you have this feeling that like, dang, I should be creating content. At least that's how I feel. It's like, I always have this constant guilt in me. I should be doing something that I'm not currently doing. So that's frustrating. And obviously that kind of leads to burnout. But I think the beauty of it is that the collaborations like this, being able to do the podcast and just kind of hang out with other derm colleagues, just having fun makes it less likely to kind of that burnout, which I know has happened to all of us at some point in time and still continues to happen. I think there's no amount of following that you can have that really will make you happy. It's kind of like that situation where people that have money is constantly working hard to get more money. There was like this book, or even like people talked about the people that like have fear that they don't have money are like the wealthiest people. It's like, I feel like sometimes that's like me on social media. It's like sometimes the more followers you gain, the more you feel like you have to hustle to keep that following or to keep growing. I don't know. I think it's just this inherent fear. At least that's how I feel. And so it definitely leads to burnout. But I try to balance it and, look at my kids. And when I'm with them, like no phones, not even near me, because I have this habit of like just grabbing my phones all the time. So I make it intentional. Like when I'm with my kids, I don't even have my phone near reach. So that way I can focus time with them. And then obviously when I'm down here filming, I have a dedicated space. It really helps me to distance myself from them so I'm not distracted and try to multitask. Like if I'm traveling on a trip, if I'm flying, I'm using that time on the plane. There's Wi-Fi to edit, to think about content, to respond to emails and things like that. I think that's like probably how a lot of moms who are like me, who are still practicing, have kids and active on social media, we do try to multitask as much as we can and then try to really spend time with kids when we're at home.
You talked a little bit about your introduction to it kind of as a creative outlet, not necessarily planning to build anything out of it. At what point during your social media journey did you realize like this is a thing that is going to be a major part of my career? Do you know when that transition happened where you're like, I'm really going to dedicate significant time to this?
Yeah, ironically, it wasn't probably until the last year or two, mostly because obviously with just how busy with the collaborations and even kind of with the growth and the partnerships I've had the past years, it's been significant compared to like the year before. And I always have this feeling where, some people talk about, oh, like last year was your year or this year is your year in the sense like maybe this is the year where brands hit you a lot in the sense like they come to you with partnerships and previous year wasn't like that. Maybe this year it's not going to be like that. And so I definitely kind of had this feeling, at least last year specifically, I was really busy, like the busiest I've ever been. I counted my trips. I think I took like 20 trips total that year. And then definitely had a lot of partnerships. It was great. But at the same time, I was really exhausted. I found myself literally traveling twice, sometimes even 3 times a month, and then just not kind of being home, missing out on a lot of school things like my daughter's Chinese New Year performance. I wasn't there. And then even my son's birthday, I was actually out that day. And then we celebrated, obviously, we had plans for celebrating like later on anyway. But I just, like kind of those moments are like, you'll never get that back. But it wasn't really until the past year or so that I really felt like, and that's kind of ironically when I stepped down as chair, mostly making room for the transition for the move, but just kind of serendipitously got busy too. And, for me, I think the social media aspect is always fun. Certainly for some, it is like almost like a full-time career, but I never really look at it like this is my sole career. My husband's a surgeon. We're comfortable financially, right? But I think for me, I always want to practice dermatology because I never want to let go of those skill sets. Especially if I'm on social media as a dermatologist, I need to keep up practice to keep up my skills, my information, and the things I talk about that's going to be relevant for my followers. So it's going to be either maybe one point in time, maybe more social media heavy, less working. Maybe next year I'm moving, joining a new practice. I may be busier with practice, less social media. So I think it's kind of fluid for me. But the past year and a half was when I really saw, wow, like this could be, if I really wanted to make a career out of it, if I were to make a career out of it, I don't think I would rely solely on partnerships with brands. I think I would probably want to do something greater and bigger, like maybe launching a platform or doing a brand or something like that, which right now I don't have any of that in mind. It's because I'm so busy. But I think if I wanted to like make a more of like a longevity thing, then I definitely want to branch out and do more than just relying on partnerships.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. And it sounds like you're maintaining that openness, that flexibility to accept what comes. I really get the impression like last year, things kind of really started to get busy and you just decided, I'm going to strike while the iron's hot. We're really going to go for it. We're going to do this push. When you started on Instagram back in 2016, it was all photographs. Then everything has transitioned into video. Did you have any hesitation about putting yourself out there on video? How did you get over that hesitation?
Yeah, I think that is definitely a very intimidating aspect. And I've had so many derm colleagues, even in conferences, like who are like, I want to start, but like, I just can't get over this awkwardness or like, I don't know how to film. And, obviously I'm really excited that you're going to be there too, Dustin. We're going to kind of do this all over again in September, the Science of Skincare Summit, and talk about like the nitty gritty stuff. But I would say, I think for me, it was actually easier because it was something I had control over it. In the past, where I had to photograph, some of the photos like of me like posing, I had to get my husband out there. And so I feel so bad. Like his only day off in residency, he took out his Nikon camera to take photos of me. He's like, what is this girl, up to? And that was like me wanting to do fashion. But I think he really felt relieved. And for me too, I was like, I could do this on my own volition. Like I didn't have to wait on that Friday afternoon or Sunday when he had time off, when he was like feeling up for taking photos. Like it was definitely awkward. I mean, I think one thing for being in front of the camera, like whether it's photograph or video, if you're on social media, you kind of at some point have to get used to looking at yourself and feeling comfortable. And so in the beginning, I would tell like colleagues, like, remember back then we would like point, like we wouldn't even talk. We would just point. It took me maybe 30 minutes to feel comfortable and says, okay, I liked my hair. I liked the way I smiled. And then I realized, honestly, the little nuances that I care about, the viewers probably didn't even notice or really didn't care for. And then the speaking part, that was actually the hardest for me because I look at Lindsay, like her contents are great, your contents are great, but you guys really are good at putting on content like to the point, succinct, people engaging and catchy, right? I'm not that type of person. So it really took me a long time to get comfortable in being able to speak in this way where it was attention grabbing and also not being overwhelming information, overloading people and just to the point. I think I'm finally, after doing this for like, 2-3 years now, I finally feel like I'm comfortable. I feel okay, confident about the information that I film. And I do it, depending on what I talk about. I write a script first. I use like a teleprompter in the CapCut app. That makes it easy. But it took me like almost 2 years to feel comfortable with myself. And I think it's just something you just have to get over. Like I just encourage people, like just start doing it. If you don't like it, redo it. But like, don't worry so much because sometimes the things that you care about, people don't even notice. So I think once you start doing it, you'll just feel more comfortable. It's like practice. Same thing with YouTube too. Like when I first started filming, it would take me like 2-3 hours to film one video. Now I can do it probably about an hour depending on the content. And I always make sure I set myself up for success. So having done the research, writing the script, and then using some sort of app that allows me to read without looking like I'm reading type of thing. Before when we didn't have those apps, it was like you would like literally like read and memorize line by line, right? And then record. And that's what I used to do. But I would say just do what you feel comfortable doing. Get comfortable looking at yourself, speaking on camera. And then the more you do, I know it'll get better for sure.
Yeah. Just start and then perfect it later.
Yeah, for sure.
It's interesting because I think I'm experiencing this right now. I've always been behind the scenes. I work with you, I work with Dustin, and we do a lot of coaching behind the scenes. And this is the first time that I'm joining this public content or content creation and experiencing every single thing that you just said about nitpicking, about being uncomfortable, about just not knowing what is going to work yet, actually, in that case. So it's interesting because I think that when you have a platform where you just create and do it, and the more you do it, the more comfortable you start to feel. And at the same time, as you said, the less you care to some degree, or the less nitpicky you probably are.
Yeah, because I found, at least with my audience too, is often the content that you put out more so than how my hair looks.
Totally.
Like beyond Red Note, that's a little different because I'll tell you, the Chinese and like just in Asia, like the way you look, and there are people that I've had people comment on things are just like totally out there that I'm like, I'm going to ignore on TikTok. But I would say most of my Instagram followers are very nice and loyal and they say nice things. But I was like, like the way I don't like my hair, like God, if I wish my hair was a little bit more voluminous. I know like those like really vanity type of things. I was like, people could care less. The content that you talk about, I think that matters more. And if you have good content, like nobody's going to care really or even notice the way your makeup is done or if you don't have makeup on and things like that. And because I would have dermatologists say like, I spent 2 hours blow drying my hair. And then I'm filming. I'm like, oh my gosh. If that makes you comfortable, go for it, right? But I don't feel like you have to be put together, like have your whole face done to gain views. It's really the content that I think really matters at the end of the day.
I think you're right. And for people that are unfamiliar, and I know actually I learned about this from you when we were in New York. Can you share more about Red Note, what it is, the kind of content that you put out?
Yeah, and this is a really exciting platform. It's kind of like how I view it, and I don't know it enough, and I'm so blessed to have an assistant who's really, we've grown this together. But I started almost, like I was 2.5 years ago, almost 3 years now, and was really like I was postpartum. My son was just born, and I was at home during my postpartum, bored out of my mind. I was on already Instagram, TikTok, and I was just like on Red Note looking to cook. And Red Note is an app that basically, in my mind, is kind of almost the conglomeration of Instagram and a little bit of TikTok. I think the interface is more like Instagram, where people post photos, videos. You can also shop on there too. And it's like a nicer aesthetic feed than the Chinese version of TikTok. But I started on there because there would be a lot of great, authentic food, Chinese recipes that my family loves. So that's how I started. And then, kind of the app, they'll feed you things that you're interested in. I started kind of digging into skincare. And actually, what really inspired me was so there is another American board certified dermatologist. His name is Dr. Jeff. I've actually met him in person. He resides in China, but he was trained at UC Irvine, I believe, and was at Harvard for a few years as faculty. But anyways, long story short, he went back to China during COVID because he was separated from his family and ended up staying in China. And he basically started kind of talking about COVID when it was like happening at that time and basically blew up on Chinese TikTok and Red Note. And now he's kind of the biggest dermatologist / influencer on Red Note. And so when I saw his information, I was like, oh, this is interesting because he's not active on Instagram, but he definitely will have English and Chinese content. So then I just like, well, I'll start like repurposing my Instagram and TikTok stuff. And I started just basically translating it with the basic like CapCut translation. And I grew to a following because when I started 2 years back, I think that was kind of almost that period, the US side, the North America side, where Instagram was like taking off among the healthcare workers during COVID. And now there's a lot of dermatologists on there in China as well. But when I first started, I was probably one of the few dermatologists on there actively talking about skincare. Being a Chinese native app, it's kind of restrictive in the sense you can't, if you're not registered and verified as a Chinese certified dermatologist, which I'm not, there are certain medical terms you can't use. Otherwise, your post would get blocked and flagged. And there are certain things. But anyway, so I found an assistant. So now what we do is we create content in Mandarin that I film, and then she edits, and then she will also translate my videos from Instagram so that way they're kosher for Red Note. I have about 163,000 followers on Red Note, and it's been a really fun journey because China is, if not the biggest, or the second biggest market for a lot of brands. Like SkinCeuticals, China is far past North America. CeraVe, when you look at like a lot of other big brands. So it's been a fun journey for me in the sense like I've been able to actually partner with these brands, the China side, in doing collaborations. Again, for me, that was purely started because I was on there for cooking and then just stumbled upon this opportunity. And now, especially with the unknowns, uncertainty with TikTok, a lot of foreigners are on Red Note. And before, I would say there's definitely a lot. I would actually find other like chemists that I follow on Instagram having a Red Note account. Glow by Ava, she's on there. Chriselle Lim, Dr. Shireen Idris is on there. But before, there would be even a lot of celebrities, foreign celebrities having a Red Note account and obviously managed by someone that knows how to operate that because, again, China is such a big market for them. And I think now with the TikTok kind of uncertainty, more people are flooding to Red Note just as an outlet, as another social media platform to scroll through for entertainment or to potentially grow. And definitely with TikTok kind of being banned too, like the past couple months ago, I just saw a huge uptick in my following too. And then also now when I look at comments, I have a lot of, because you can see where they're registered as like the account, a lot of US follower or US audiences commenting on my even Mandarin posts. And so, it just speaks to the fact that there's, a lot of Chinese people everywhere. And this app is obviously the most heavily utilized by, Mandarin speaking audience. But there is, I think, a lot of room to grow for everyone, including, I think, us American board certified dermatologists, just because we kind of lead the way in kind of that skincare philosophy, talking about like vitamin C in the morning, retinoid at night. That's something we've been talking about and preaching for years and just gaining popularity in China now and people starting talking about it and drilling, kind of draining that. So I didn't feel like there is opportunity for all of us to grow on that platform, regardless of whether you're Mandarin speaking or not.
You are very active and you have a strong presence, Instagram, TikTok, Red Note. And we talked about the mom guilt a little bit, and we talked about content creation guilt. How do you approach your content creation? Do you batch create? You also talked about writing scripts. Do you have a day of the week that you assign to content? What is your approach?
Yeah, my approach is I definitely batch. So I have my assistant for Red Note. What we do is we usually check in, and my days are like usually Thursdays and Fridays, and sometimes during the weekends, if say my son is napping, my daughter has a play date and she's out with my husband. So I just try to take advantage of every little time that I get. But I would say dedicated time is usually Thursdays and Fridays. That is when I don't work. And so I will sit down with my Red Note assistant maybe once a week or every other week. She's in like tech and IT, but she's very into skincare. And so she knows very much like the audience and she scrolls through Red Note. So she will kind of keep an eye on the comments, what's trending. She will come up with content ideas. I would write them out in English. She will translate them into Mandarin. I still struggle a lot because my literacy level is like second grade. So I will copy and paste using CapCut, but I will Google Translate because I don't know how to pronounce all the words. And this is where I probably struggle the most and taking the longest time in filming. But I'll try to batch like 4 to 5 videos and that she will kind of scatter throughout the month. And then she'll kind of mix with my US content with subtitles. So that's Red Notes. And then when we do have collaborations, those are more like timely, then we'll prioritize those. Again, I would write them in English. Some brands actually, like I've worked with CeraVe and SkinCeuticals, they actually sometimes want me to film in English. So that makes it easy. For my Instagram and TikTok, I do a little bit of basically scrolling myself, seeing like what maybe Dustin is posting, what Lindsay is posting, what Mamina is posting, like what's trending, and I'll film those. Otherwise, I do have an editor that I use mostly for my YouTube, but also I've leveraged her to just kind of scroll through trendy stuff because that's not what I'm good at. And also, to be honest, I don't have time for it. And so I'll ask her, I'll give her ideas of what I want to talk about. I'll say, I see that I'm really into Japanese skincare these days. Let's create some videos on those. And so she will kind of basically, we'll go back and forth and she will like write the script for me. And I'll kind of use her script because at the end of the day, especially when she's talking about skincare content, it's not always 100% accurate. So she'll kind of give me a backbone, but then I will fill in the information. So we kind of go back and forth on the YouTube script as well as the content. But she's really great about catching those viral, like, like maybe you're just doing a pose, but there's like a trending audio or like a text overlay. So she'll send me those and she'll send me kind of on a weekly basis. So half of the short form content for Instagram and TikTok is from her, half of it is from me. And then all my YouTube is between us back and forth. And then I film and then she edits.
I mean, that's, I think, a very interesting insight because it's not something that necessarily one person can do alone. There's a team behind a team. Dustin has a team. So maybe talk about that for a second, because now you have someone for Red Note, you have an editor. Do you have someone that helps you post?
Yeah, so that's one thing I'm trying to look for. I mean, on my Red Notes, because I just don't know the Mandarin, I can't operate the app very well. She does everything. All I do is film, maybe go in and comment, scroll through. But Instagram and TikTok, as well as YouTube, I actually have my brother-in-law upload my YouTube videos and do the timestamps. I pay him for that. But because it's very timely, I have yet to find an assistant. And that is one I'm like looking for. I might use my Red Note assistant too, but she's actually quite busy with doing Red Note. But I actually post everything myself. So that is one aspect that I'm struggling with. I'm looking for help and I'm still trying to figure out a rhythm. Right now is what I do is I will post on TikTok and then maybe see what does well. I almost feel like I use TikTok as like an experiment. I don't know why. I think just because I started with Instagram, I really want everything to be the best for Instagram, even though I know it's not always the case. And sometimes the video that you make that you didn't care for really went viral and the one that you really care about, didn't. But I kind of just post everything to TikTok first. And sometimes I might even post multiple videos a day and then take whatever I think did well on TikTok and then repost it on Instagram. At least that's been my trial right now. And what I do is literally, I don't even have an app, which I should, but I literally just tee it up the morning of when I'm like in my bathroom before I'm like when I'm brushing my teeth, just get everything ready. And then before I head into work, I like post. That's not the best. I'm struggling. That is one area I really could use some help. But I think the problem is I don't have someone I trust. I would give them my login to post for me and things like that. And so that's why it's like I haven't found the right person. So right now I'm just doing everything myself. But yeah, it's definitely like outsource as much as you can. At the very least, the editing aspect, which I know a lot of us are kind of technically challenged, it just takes time to learn. But if you don't have the time for that, then definitely outsource it because you can use your time where it's most important, which is maybe creating content, responding to comments, thinking about content to post and things like that.
Before we wrap up, I've got a couple questions I want to ask. And the first is kind of your work with residents. And I wanted to know from your perception, how has the TikTokification of medicine impacted your residents? Are they coming in wanting to be active on social media themselves? Are they seeing what you do and trying to replicate that? Have you seen it negatively impact medical education in any way?
I don't think negatively. I've definitely seen a handful of residents coming to me, patients of mine that are on TikTok. They follow me. Like I have a lot of residents, colleagues, and physicians in locally that follow me, and it's always been very supportive. I've been really grateful for that. My residents, I think they love seeing what I do, and a lot of them are now on social media, including some of the faculty here at the University of Minnesota, like few PEDSTRM faculty that are really big and hair experts. I remember just even a few years back, we had a few residents graduating and they were really hush hush about their social media. Like it wasn't like appropriate. But now it's like everybody is on it. And in fact, we are encouraged to be on it because it's kind of like that next wave where that is just where people are turning for information. So it's like you either acknowledge its existence, you don't have to be on there, or you can be on there if that's something that really is a passion of yours. So it's always been positive for me. And where I work, with my personality, I have fun with my residents. Like they really love asking me questions. And I always get, so many PR packages. I bring them into work. I share with them. They really enjoy that. I actually give quite a few lectures to my residents on cosmeceuticals, TikTok skincare trends. And that's always been a favorite for them, like topic wise to talk about. And then, obviously, like at the AAD, they've actually become more engaged in doing some of the events, the parties, and things like that. So it's always been positive. And I feel like I have seen a more positive shift towards residents and doctors being on social media. I think only for the better. It has never really negatively impacted me. And in fact, my colleagues, and I'm not a big, I don't like to advertise myself like, oh, hey, check if you want to learn more about skincare. But, my husband and my colleagues, for them, it's so funny. Like when they're walking out a visit with a patient and they're asking skincare questions, she's like, you know what? My colleague, Dr. Lou, she's got a great following on Instagram. Check her out. She's got great recommendations. She almost will use me to kind of as an exit strategy for those last minute questions that patients have about skincare.
Yeah.
So I think if anything, it's been positive and it's been a fun journey with my residents. Also, we've actually done local education with my L'Oreal rep, where we Mayo Clinic and Iowa residency programs where we kind of just get together over dinner or virtually and talk about skincare science, and they get a little goodie bag. So it's been positive and good learning for them as well.
If somebody's just getting started on social media, they're in the medical space, what are maybe 2 or 3 top tips that you would have for them to encourage them getting started on their journey?
Yeah, I would say just get started. I think you can sometimes think a lot and almost kind of hinder yourself about what you want to talk about. I think a lot of the times the things I want to talk about just kind of come that spur of the moment, like an idea, jot that down, start a note list and just start filming. Don't think too much, just start posting. And then I would say find an area that interests you, that you're passionate about, because I think burnout is so real. And if you're so always fixated on growth, which I know is definitely important, and I think as dermatologists with our personality, that is something that it makes us feel like it's worthwhile, right? But kind of have an interest in mind and focus on that. Otherwise, I think if you get so fixated on the growth or the partnerships, which will come naturally as you get out there and have more posts and have more just presence in the space. But if you focus on that as your end goal, you're going to get burnt out so easily because sometimes it doesn't happen for a long time, right? I think brands are also right there every year looking for bigger derms and then maybe a group of smaller derms. I think they always kind of mix and match who they want to use. And so I think if your end goal is to make money or say partner with brands, I think then you're kind of already setting yourself up for disappointment because it may not happen immediately. So talk about something that you enjoy that is more sustainable and more like a longevity. And then the deals and the partnerships will come naturally. And then I would say reach out to other derms, partner, in the sense collaborate, or say if you're stuck. I think, I've always mentored a few colleagues and I really enjoy that. I think it's helped me make more friendships and learn about other people more. And so I think reach out. I think, either it's in meetings or messages. I think many of us are very supportive. We should be supportive. And I think many of us are. And so I think, if you're stuck, you don't know what to do, come to the Science of Skincare Summit.
That's a good one. That's true.
Right? Yeah, come and learn more. And then also it's just reach out to us. I think we're always willing to help a colleague who's wanting to grow. And because I think there's space for all of us. It's never too crowded or it should never be a competition because to be honest, there's so many of us out here now, but brands, they would like to partner with us for different reasons, right? And sometimes it's because of your skin tone or maybe where you work or what you do or what you talk about. So I would say it's not really a competition. It's just I think finding what you're comfortable talking about and finding that space for yourself so that way you can have that longevity.
Jenny just mentioned Science of Skincare. The three of us will be there for the Dermfluencer University. Please check it out. There's a great workshop that each of them are going to be leading, so you can find out even more behind the scenes information. And speaking of which, Jenny, before we wrap up, we'd love for you to plug your podcast.
Dr. Lindsay, Dr. Mamina, and I have started a podcast basically as three derm moms, but also content creators and also working in clinics, seeing patients. We just want to kind of shoot the stuff on all things skincare, products, motherhood, women's health. We've actually had a guest on talking about pelvic floor therapy to makeup to, everything that you can think of. We just want to talk about everything and anything. And so really excited, but really with a skincare focus in mind. So that's been our fun little side hustle recently.
So fun.
Yeah.
Well, we'll make sure to link to your podcast and our podcast show notes. And we're, enjoying those episodes and look forward to everything else that you guys continue to produce together. That's quite the dream team there of three dermatologists creating amazing content.
The idea behind it was, I don't know if you guys watch, but it's all in. It's 4 tech dudes. So that was kind of the idea behind that. So it's 3 of us instead of 4 dudes, 3 derm moms.
Love it. Well, we hope you enjoyed this episode of Med Creator 101 and it gave you some insight and inspiration and that you can do it. You just have to start. Thank you so much for Dr. Jenny Liu for joining us today. You can follow us on Instagram at MedCreator101 and at Derm Talk on Instagram, TikTok, and Rednote, and YouTube.